The Nigerian telecom industry is expected to grow from about $9 billion in 2024 to about $11 billion by 2029. Now, these figures reflect a steady expansion within the sector, likely driven by factors such as increased mobile penetration, rising data usage, and ongoing technological advancement in the country's telecommunications infrastructure. Despite this projection, telecom operators in the country are facing significant challenges like infrastructure limitations, regulatory complexities, and increasing competition. Now, I will be joined by Tony Emokpere, President of the Association of Telecommunications Companies of Nigeria, ATCON, to discuss some of the issues affecting telecom operators and proposed solutions needed to address them. How has the persistent issue of fiber optic cable cuts affected the operational cost and service reliability of telecom companies?
Okay, the fiber optic cables is what provides connectivity to all the base stations and all the transmission equipment that the companies rely on. And each time there is a cut, it affects the ability for calls to be made and traffic to pass through. Of course, the networks have redundancies in their networks, but the consistent cuts really impacts on their ability to provide these services. And then, of course, these costs also have a remedial cost to them. And sometimes these are done haphazardly and to the extent that sometimes you have to replace the whole entire stretch of cables because the cable can only survive for so many cuts per kilometer. So this adversely affects the cost of the operators. Most of these costs are not actually budgeted for, and we are seeing an increase in the number of cuts that they experience along the routes.
Now, there are reports that the government is planning to, criminalize fiber cable destruction, trying to impose penalties on offenders. How will that help?
Well, will help in deterring for sure. Don't forget, it's a big disruption to communication and even to business and ease of doing business in the country. We see the impact of the submarine cable. Time passed, and you can see the effects. You can imagine that's happening across the country in a macro level. So the criminalization of this kind of acts will be a big deterrent and save the operators a huge amount of funds that they deploy into fixing these kind of issues.
As the president of ATCON, are there specific regulatory measures you're advocating for to address these challenges of cable vandalism and to ensure the protection of telecom infrastructure?
Yes, one of the things we have been advocating for is for actually telecom infrastructure to be designated as a critical national infrastructure. That way, these kind of acts can be deterred and also prosecuted at a certain point. Right now, the operators or those who provide this kind of infrastructure have no recourse or little or no recourse to remedial effects. But once it's designated a critical national infrastructure, it will become known that this issue is not just affecting the operators, but actually affects the country as well. We all rely on communication. Even right now, as I'm talking to you, this call is basically communication related. Without these fiber optic cables we're talking about, for example, I have a fiber to the home connectivity. If there are instant cuts, I can't even be on this program. And there are many more other things that are relying on this. So the critical national infrastructure status for all telecom assets is what we are clamoring for. And I think we've been hearing that it's almost in the works, but we still need to see action in that regard.
Now, ALTEN, that is the Association of Licensed Telecom Operators of Nigeria, is also pushing for tariff increases, saying that the current price control mechanism is out of sync with economic realities. Now, how do increased taxes, levies, and the multiple taxes impact the financial viability of telecom operators?
Okay, we are all advocating for the same thing. ATCON is also advocating for the same thing in terms of tariff increase. And the issue is this: when you look at the cost of running telecom operations vis-a-vis the revenue that most of the operators are getting is a total mismatch. Right now, a lot of them are running at near loss. Some are actually losing. We are seeing instances where operators are cutting down on their budgets for the year. Rollout of infrastructure is being impacted due to low revenues from subscribers and things like that. We understand the challenge of inflation that is across all board, but for the telecom industry, it's been biting. For example, it's been 11 years since there's been a form of tariff increase in the sector. So it's critical that we look at this issue and guard the industry from further demise.
So let's assume that there is a dialogue between the government and stakeholders in the industry on this proposed tariff adjustment. How will that help ensure a balance between what consumers can afford and what is there to sustain operators financially?
That's exactly what the dialogue will produce, in the sense that all the factors will be considered, and then a new tariff will be come out of that exercise. If you notice, you can hardly find anybody saying specifics as regards to what the tariff hike should be per se, because there are a lot of considerations and a lot of factors that go into determining the tariffs. There are already guidelines by the regulators already for tariff increase and things like that. So it's just for the regulators and the government to engage with the sector, like you mentioned, and a new tariff comes out. And then I think above that, what needs to be done is to be kind of a tariff structure whereby as factors change, then there's almost a dynamic adjustment of tariffs. There is no country just leaves the tariff stagnant. It's supposed to be open to market forces. And then, of course, there's also healthy competition. So it's not necessarily that it's going to be one tariff for everybody. I mean, those who want to compete might be able to offer services or different kind of services at different rates. But the base floor has to be determined and the base floor has to be increased so that there'll be a good playing field for all operators to work on.
Mr. Makwer, considering the projected growth of Nigeria's telecom markets, which is, from about $9 billion this year, 2024, to about $11.4 billion by 2029, what strategies is your association recommending to mitigate the risks associated with infrastructure, vandalism, and also to ensure the sustainable development of the industry?
Well, one of the things we're advocating for first, of course, is this critical national infrastructure status for the assets. That's number one. Number two, I know we've been having different engagements with the regulators to get some form of standardization across the industry so that once these infrastructures are deployed, they're deployed to a particular standard and those standards are maintained. I know the regulator is more interested in what they call quality of experience. It's not just you have a good service, but what's the experience what experience of the user have while utilizing these services. So standardization will help, and we're working to that regard. Also, things like localization of a lot of the services will help in that regard as well. I mean, we should. There's a lot of things that should be localized. Even Zoom, for example, we have providers who provide this kind of service for online conferencing and things like that. Utilizing more local services for even government agencies and things of that nature would help stimulate the market and ensure that there's a continued growth. But above all, if these tariffs are not adjusted in any way, shape, or form, this planned growth and increase will be seriously impacted.
And would a local content legislation, for the telecom sector help address some of these issues? Definitely
it will. I know that we already have a local content policy, by the way, that the nation has by definition. I think it's to apply to the sector that's supposed to be important as well. We have a lot of homegrown engineers who are doing extremely well, not just here, but also abroad. I can tell you, for example, that I give an example, like 3G was launched in Nigeria before some of the advanced countries, and a lot of our engineers locally trained are actually doing extremely well abroad in Canada and the US, or who are actually just worked here in Nigeria. So we need to try and localize a lot of these services here so that we can ensure that the industry becomes more vibrant. Local companies should be encouraged to participate actively. There should be issues whereby some scope of work should be strictly localized. There's no reason why, for example, a foreign company should be involved in design. If you give it, this is strictly an intellectual venture, and there are local engineers. In fact, the Nigerians that do this abroad as well. So there are many measures we're trying to put in place and things we're advocating for to ensure that the local market is further stimulated, and then the local services should be utilized by government. We should not be using foreign provided services. And the good thing about Nigeria and the luck we have already is that we have a lot locally. It's just for us to tap into it.
Certainly right. Tony Mbokwere, President of the Association of Telecommunications Companies of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.